Hi, and welcome to the Early Retirement Roadmap Podcast, the show where I help you prepare for and thrive in early retirement. Now, what's the number one fear people have about retirement, no matter how much they've saved? Will I run out of money? And let me tell you, this is fear from people with hundreds of thousands of dollars saved to multimillionaires. We all worry about this, and it doesn't magically disappear once you hit a certain number. In today's podcast, we're going to talk about one of the most popular methods for figuring out how much you can safely spend in retirement, the 4% rule. But let's get one thing straight up front. The 4% rule is a helpful starting point. It gives you a rough idea of what a sustainable withdrawal might look like, but it has real limitations, especially if you're retiring early. Because it was designed for a 30-year retirement, not 35 or 40 years like many early retirees face. And it assumes a specific kind of portfolio, mostly U.S. stocks and bonds. It doesn't account for major one-time expenses, and it ignores other income sources you might have, like Social Security, rental income, or part-time work you may choose to do in your early retirement, perhaps as a way to ease into it. So today, we'll use the 4% rule as a reference point, not a prescription. I'll talk about what the data actually says about running out of money, and more importantly, how you can build a plan that lets you enjoy life without lying awake at night wondering if you've overspent. It's so easy to fall into the trap of fear-based planning, to think, I don't know what the market's going to do, I don't know how long I'll live, what if something major goes wrong? And these concerns are certainly valid. But what if I told you that history suggests the odds of running out of money, even if you're moderately cautious, are a lot lower than most people think? In fact, there's a study by Michael Kitces that looked at a 60-40 portfolio, 60% U.S. stocks, 40% bonds, going all the way back to 1870. He asked, what happens if you withdraw 4% a year, adjusted for inflation over a 30-year retirement? And here's what he found. In almost every 30-year period going back 150 years, retirees didn't run out of money. Not only that, 2 out of every 3 scenarios ended up with more than double the portfolio value they started with. You are actually more likely to end up with 5 times your original balance than you were to end with less than what you started. That includes periods with sky-high inflation, world wars, the Great Depression, oil shocks, tech crashes, and housing meltdowns. So no, it's not just cherry-picked rosy market conditions. Now let's be clear again, this is historical data. It's not a guarantee of the future, and it's based on a very specific set of assumptions. That 4% rule came from research by Bill Bengen in the 1990s. He wanted to know the highest withdrawal rate that would have survived every 30-year period in the historical record. So by definition, it's conservative. It's based on the worst-case scenario. And it assumes you're withdrawing the same inflation-adjusted amount every year, no matter what happens in the market. But here's the problem with that. Let's say you retire at 55, like many early retirees aim to do. That's not a 30-year window. It could be 40 years or more. The 4% rule wasn't designed for that. It also doesn't adjust if your spending needs change, if you have health expenses, or if you get hit with a major repair bill or family obligation. And here's another risk that's especially important for early retirees: sequence of returns risk. This is the danger that the market could drop early in your retirement just as you start drawing down your savings. If that happens, your portfolio could take a much bigger hit than if a downturn came later. That's why being flexible with your withdrawals is so important. That's why I think the better approach is flexibility. Instead of rigidly pulling the same amount each year, what if you had a system that actually adjusted to reality? What a novel idea. Withdraw a little more in good years, pull back slightly in tough ones, skip your inflation adjustment during market downturns, or shift where you pull money from depending on what parts of your portfolio are performing best. This dynamic approach is often called a guardrail strategy, and research shows it can allow for higher initial withdrawals with a lower risk of running out of money, especially over longer time frames. For example, research by Michael Kitces shows that using a guardrails approach, where you adjust withdrawals up or down based on portfolio performance, can allow for higher initial withdrawals while still protecting against running out of money, even over long retirements. And this is where diversification really helps. Remember, the 4% rule is based on a simple 60-40 portfolio, 60% stocks and 40% bonds. But most of us are more diversified. You might have small cap stocks, real estate, cash, maybe even annuities or TIPS, which are Treasury inflation protected securities, and are government bonds specifically designed to help protect investors from inflation. This kind of diversification gives you options. During a period like the early 2000s, when U.S. stocks went nowhere for a decade, other assets performed better. If you were retired at this time and had assets outside of stocks, you would have leaned on those assets instead of selling stocks at a loss. That flexibility can be the difference between your plan working and your plan failing. But here's something else to consider. Being too conservative with your withdrawals has its own risks. Many people live like they're on the edge of financial ruin, even though they have more than enough. They skip family trips, delay home repairs, avoid generosity. And then they look back after 15 years and realize their portfolio has grown and that they've missed out on a decade of life they can't get back. Let me give you a real example. If you had retired in 1975 with $1 million, sticking to the 4% rule would have meant spending $40,000 per year. But in hindsight, based on how the market performed over the next 30 years, you could have safely spent over 7% annually. That's $70,000 instead of $40,000 every single year. That's the difference between holding back and fully living the retirement you imagined with your loved ones, and between putting off the bucket list and actually living it. So yes, it's important to avoid overspending, but don't forget, underspending can rob you too. Now, how do you build a plan that balances these two risks? Here are a few practical steps. Start by running your own retirement numbers with a reputable retirement calculator or retirement planning tools like Bolden.com, one that I personally use. Plug in your savings, expected expenses, and see how different withdrawal rates affect your plan. Consider talking to a financial planner, especially if your situation is complex or you want a second opinion on your withdrawal strategy. Review your plan every year. Markets change, your life changes, and your plan should adapt too. And build in some flexibility for big one-time expenses. Don't stretch every dollar to its breaking point. I hope you found this podcast helpful, and if you've already retired or thinking about it, I hope it's assuaged your fears about running out of money. And remember, in the end, the real goal isn't to have the biggest portfolio when you die. It's to use the money you've worked hard to save to live the life you actually want, while you still can. That's all for this episode. If you enjoyed it, please like, follow, share, or subscribe. And when you're not on the go, check out my Early Retirement Roadmap YouTube channel or go to mikeupland.com for all of my media, including my blog. Thanks for listening, and until next time, this is Mike Upland, early retiree last year at age 55. Take care and make the most of today.